Hello everybody and welcome back to What's Been Playing, the show where we put a spotlight on select video games and answer that lifelong question of, what is really worth playing? Hopefully this video is not coming to you guys a month after the last one. Talk about more consistent uploads, am I right? Nonetheless, I am keeping my promise from last video, and today we are taking a look at Kirby and the Forgotten Land, the Pink Puffball's latest outing on the Nintendo Switch. I do love myself a bit of Kirby every now and then, and this latest entry has a lot of people talking, that's for sure. A fully 3D Kirby game, something that fans have been asking for since Kirby 64, if I'm being honest. It's just crazy to think that up until March of this year, Kirby has been a series that, at least with its main titles, has stayed as a 2D or sometimes 2.5D series if you want to be technical. But I mean, even then, it didn't stop the previous games from being fantastic. But deep down, I think all of us wanted to explore the realm of what if and just ask, what if? Well, we finally have said what if answered with our first fully 3D game. That just begs the question now, what took them so long? But with a series like Kirby, one that has stayed 2D for almost all of its life, the question is, how did the devs translate that gameplay we all know and love to a 3D space? There are plenty of examples of games that had a really rough transition to 3D because they just couldn't figure out how to transition that gameplay style. Well, that's what we are here to find out. So sit back, relax, and let's take a romp through this mysterious land. Let's take a look at Kirby and the Forgotten Land. The Kirby series. It's great to see that the board genre is getting some spotlight. Kirby is a series that needs no introduction. I mean, he's definitely a Nintendo All-Star and is still going strong with that title. Kirby has been a series known for being simplistic platformers that anyone can sink their teeth into. Despite that, these games are usually pretty top-notch thanks to the amazing copyability mechanics, the great controls, and the music. Oh, the music. But admittedly, as of the past few years, the Kirby formula that we have continued to see time and time again has gotten a little stale. Not to say that the past few games were bad or anything, whoa no. Games like Planet Robobot and Return to Dreamland were amazing, but it was more so the same formula with a few additions here or there. Fast forward to the last of the DLC for Kirby Star Allies, the series director, Shinyu Kumazaki, hope I said that right, stated in an interview that they were preparing to plan the next stage of Kirby. I mean, upon hearing that, I would assume that most fans had the same idea. Was it finally time for a 3D Kirby game? Were they finally going to do it? All it took was a Nintendo Direct announcement on September 3rd, 2021, and we finally got our answer. Yes! And naturally, this was a pretty big deal. I mean, we were finally getting a taste as to how Kirby would function in a 3D space. And from all the trailers that were coming out, things seem pretty promising. So without further ado, let's see how this adventure begins. Our story begins with Kirby just doing his usual Kirby thing. But that piece is short-lived when all of a sudden these massive portals begin to appear in the sky and suck up everything around it, including our Pink Puffball. Kirby then wakes up on a shoreline. I don't know why, but kinda reminded me of Crash Bandicoot, eh? And well, we gotta just find out how to get home. But it's not long before Kirby spots a bunch of Wildies get captured right before his eyes by these weird crow things. For whatever reason, they need them, and being the adorable little hero he is, Kirby ain't gonna have any of that shit. As to why the Wildies are getting kidnapped, it's unclear, but anyone attempting to capture these cute things deserve 1,000 years of suffering anyways, so it doesn't matter. It's not long after that we meet Elfilin, Kirby's guide for this adventure, a cute, big-eared chinchilla that I could only wish was real and could have as a pet of my own. From there on, your objectives are pretty simple. Traverse this forgotten land and save the Wildies. A very simple setup. While this game does a lot to deviate itself from previous games, one thing that stays consistent is its storytelling. It's that typical Kirby fare. While we do get some lore at the end of the game, we have a very simple get-to-the-end kind of setup with its story. One thing's for sure, I have a feeling we aren't in Popstar anymore. Remember Shiverstar from Kirby 64? Yeah, let's make a whole game out of that. If it wasn't obvious to tell from the trailers, the kind of landscapes Kirby is traversing this time around are very post-apocalyptic Earth-esque. Giant abandoned cities where nature slowly begins to reclaim itself, deserted factories and power plants. All the levels here look like they're imitating something we would see in real life, which is definitely a refreshing change of pace, visually. What the game lacks in direct storytelling, it makes up for with opportunities to read in between the lines. I mean, Kirby games have always had some creepy elements in them, right? Kirby in a post-apocalyptic Earth setting fits right in. I can't deny it though, I definitely wish there were some more cutscenes and bits of story here and there. The setting and the ideas are there, but it would have been kind of nice to be able to flesh it out a bit, you know? There are a total of 6 worlds to tackle throughout this adventure, each with their own theme. The giant city as previously mentioned, an amusement park, a huge sandy wasteland, and a few others. Also, shout out to said desert world. Right after finishing the world before, I saw that we were going to a desert-looking area, and I think to myself, a desert area, how original. Little did I know that the name of said area, however, was Original Wasteland. Man, I sure manifested that one. I know I briefly mentioned Crash Bandicoot early before, but honestly, you can kinda see the same kind of level design philosophy sprinkled throughout. The game has a heavy emphasis on railroading you in one set path with a hallway-type design to them. It may seem restrictive to some, but I think it helps to keep the action set pieces coming one after another, which helps to give the levels not only more of an identity, but to keep them interesting. There are times where the level design does like to get expansive, but honestly those are my least favorite parts, since now everything is a bit more spread out and takes longer to get to. Like Crash Bandicoot, however, the camera is also pretty much locked to one perspective, so that can make getting a view of your surroundings at times a pain, especially with backtracking, which is not fun here. Something that I love about Forgotten Land, however, is that jumping into this game feels just as comfortable as the other games, which I think is extremely important when making the jump to the third dimension. Despite the 3D plane, controlling Kirby here feels extremely natural and controls just how you would expect him to. There are of course a few differences here and there, but yeah, this feels like Kirby. You can swallow enemies of course, slide, puff up like a balloon, though this time for a limited amount of time like in 64, and of course use copy abilities. All the bells and whistles are here. Though we do have a new dodge roll which can be executed by guarding and moving the control stick. I didn't really find a ton of use for it at first, but after realizing the potential it had, I used it a lot more. More on that later. Each level of course follows that typical finish the stage structure as most platformers do. Each course however does have their own set of challenges to accomplish in each, which reward you with another captured Waddle Dee as well as 5 hidden Waddle Dees sprinkled throughout. Sort of like the green stars from Super Mario 3D World. It could be a simple don't get hit challenge to something like finding a hidden area. On the one hand, I think they're a really nice way to have the player absorb everything you can from each level. But I am a fan of 3D platformers, and as a result, there is nothing more annoying than accidentally missing one and having to replay the stage, potentially multiple times to complete said challenge. I'm the kind of person who's gotta try and get all the challenges on the first run. There will be certain points where you'll need a specific number of Waddle Dees to progress, and playing the game normally will still leave you with more than enough of them to progress. I really wish it was possible though to just collect the Waddle Dee in a stage you already finished, or in cases with boss levels, immediately restart a boss because having to exit the stage every time I messed up sucked. These little star coins can also be found throughout each level, which function as this game's currency. More on that later as well. There is also a multiplayer option, so you can explore these levels with a friend who takes control of Bandana Dee. Where these levels shake things up is in what's probably the main gimmick of this game, the introduction of Mouthful Mode. In what's almost like a slightly more restrictive version of the capture mechanic from Mario Odyssey, Kirby can instill nightmare fuel into anyone he sees and attempt to swallow entire real-world objects into him. God man, are you good? That doesn't look good. Depending on the object, each transformation serves a variety of different uses. Use Kirby as a car to traverse landscapes quickly and open new paths, turning into a giant blobby Kirby that spits water out, I like this one a lot. Or maybe a giant vending machine that launches cold refreshments hard enough to kill you. Jesus Christ, the lawsuits. Also, did anyone else get Fluzzard vibes from Mario Galaxy 2 with the Arch Mouthful mode? This new mode allows for Kirby to take on a variety of different challenges that make use of the setting, and I really like that. It really feels like Kirby is truly interacting within the environment, no matter how spooky this may look. Easily the best part is, you get to keep your hat based on whatever copy ability you have. I love that very much. Game of the Year. As usual, Kirby is rocking a pretty decent arsenal thanks to the copy ability system. Unfortunately, there aren't as many as previous games with only 12 this time around, which is a bit of a bummer, but there's still a good enough variety to go around. Most of them still retain that versatility seen in the previous games and allow players to tackle challenges and stages in their own way. Whacking foes big and small with a hammer, creating gusts of wind and blazing across the landscapes with Tornado, or maybe freezing everything around you with ice. My favorites were probably Fire and the new Ranger ability, as the dash that comes with said Fire ability is nice, and
for his neutral special, he wields a gun.
Yeah, this doesn't get old. I would say that the one I didn't really enjoy using was the new Drill Power. Offensively, it just isn't as effective of a tool, but as a means of exploration, it's great. All of these copy abilities help to make this adventure a much more exciting one, and does wonders for keeping that pace going. Throughout the overworld, you can find these little portals known as treasure roads, which serve as time trials with a specific ability or a mouthful ability. Not only do they help to serve as a means to practice the ins and outs of each power, but they also reward you with a rare stone, which can actually be used to evolve copy abilities. By gathering said rare stones as well as these blueprints you can find in the levels, you can upgrade these abilities to give them new attacks or make them stronger, which is an idea I fell in love with. Some of the abilities get hella sweet upgrades, like Fire's final form, the Dragon Fire. This thing does wonders for dealing damage quickly, as well as having a nifty air dash that lasts quite a while, or the Ranger's evolutions, where you go from 1 gun to 2 guns, and then to a laser blaster, which completely fucks bosses up and creates a large shockwave after. Probably one of my favorite abilities in the entire game, if I'm being honest. Regardless, the ability to upgrade copy abilities is beyond cool and helps to give them a lot more effectiveness later in the game, where the challenge becomes a tad greater. You know, don't want to turn it up too much since this is a Kirby game we're talking about. You're able to upgrade your abilities anytime you visit Waddle Dee Town, which sort of serves as a hub world in the vein of Super Mario Galaxy 2, now that I think about it. All of the Waddle Dees you rescue are sent back here, and the more you collect, the livelier it gets. Along with the area where you can upgrade your abilities, there's also a variety of different shops where you can give yourself a little push in levels, play some minigames, or engage in some challenges like the Coliseum, which acts as this game's arena mode. This is also where you'll be spending most of the star coins you collect in-game. Call me a terrible person, but I love how the Waddle Dees fall over if you hit them with an attack. That's both horrifying and adorable. This is also the place where you can view your collectibles as well as obtain the main objective that isn't integral for progressions, the Capsule Toys. Every Kirby game as of recent has had some kind of collectible, whether they're stickers, keychains, or puzzle pieces. This time, it's these little capsules straight out of one of those gotcha machines. Either in levels or from these little machines, you can get different ones from 4 different volumes. Cool and all, but you will get yourself dupes, and it is required for full completion, so that's annoying. The hub is the perfect size and has enough to do to keep you interested, and getting to see what it has to offer is a good time in itself. Kirby in the Forgotten Land is packing a vibrant array of colors no matter where you are. Despite the game running at 30 FPS, this game looks positively gorgeous, and it's a true joy to look at. All of the environmental details and effects really come together to make this place seem like a decrepit, long-abandoned world, and it hits that mark perfectly. Not only that, but the music. Oh man. The music is positively rocking here with some great level themes. The main theme of this game goes for a leitmotif, having the theme sprinkled here and there throughout different songs in the soundtrack. It's filled to the brim with heart-pumping, upbeat tunes that get stuck in your head quite easily, especially the boss themes. Like I said earlier, not only do the Waddle Dees help to repopulate the Waddle Dee Town, but they also serve as a means to progress in the game, specifically for the bosses. As most would expect, there is a boss at the end of each of the worlds, either facing against members of the Beast Pack, the main threat of this game, or more familiar enemies from series past. Given the shift in perspective, the bosses feel much more involved at times than previous entries, requiring careful pattern memorization at times. Something that I love in these fights, and I really didn't know this at first, as previously mentioned, but dodge rolling from an attack at the right time essentially serves as a chance to release a plethora of strong counterattacks, which looks super cool. I've heard a lot of people compare it to Bayonetta's Witch Time or a Flurry Rush in Breath of the Wild. But at the end of the day, they still feel like Kirby bosses, and I can definitely say that I've felt like I've done something like this before in previous games.
And on that topic, even with all these new additions, I would still say it still feels like standard Kirby. I think the developers wanted to definitely try and play it safe, which, on the record, is not a bad thing.
I think that the devs wanted to stick to what they knew best so that the transition to 3D would be smooth and feel natural, and obviously it worked. This game is fantastic, but it definitely feels like something you've done before in something like Triple Deluxe, Star Allies, or any of the other games. It still does have an identity to call its own, however, which sets it apart, so it's not a glaring issue, just something I've noticed. Kirby in the Forgotten Land still does so many things, and does them right, and it's amazing to think that this transition went so well.
With that, however, with the meat and potatoes out of the way, we have ourselves a story to conclude. As with the Pokemon Legends video, I'll have a timestamp posted right here so that you can head to, so you can skip the spoilers, since this game is still relatively new. Alrighty, for those who stuck around, let's conclude this story.
Upon reaching the end of World 4, where you fight a possessed King Dedede, Elfilin gets snatched from right under your nose, requiring you to go and save them as well. Upon reaching the Redgar Forbidden Lands and plowing through the last of the Beast Pack's defenses, Kirby heads down into an internal factory to face the mind-controlled King Dedede once again. After defeating him and coming to his senses, Kirby and the others decide to book it towards the elevator to get away, but in an attempt to save one of the Waddle Dees who tripped in the escape, the king sacrifices himself to save the little guy. Aw, what a good dude. Kirby and co. take the elevator toward the mysterious Lab Discoverer, where a pre-recorded message begins to play, introducing them to the lab with full-on voice acting, surprisingly. The message is basically a tour in a sense to introduce the mysterious ultimate life form.
I'm still the ultimate life form, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Nah, just kidding. We're introduced to the ultimate life form known as ID-F86, a being who had the ability to teleport through space. However, the being had to be contained due to the fact that it basically tried to destroy the entire fucking world. As the elevator rises, we see hundreds of Wildlies forced to run on these hamster wheel looking things before the message begins to talk about a failed warp experiment which caused a portion of ID-F86 to split up from itself. Once the elevator ride ends, you head through these double doors and instant Metroid vibes. I mean, come on, who wouldn't get vibes from something like Metroid from seeing that? You are greeted by the leader of the Beast Pack, Leongar, who explains to Kirby that people used F-86's power to abandon this world and head to a land of dreams. Being the final boss, however, Leongar wants this power to himself so that he as well as the Beast Pack can head to this land of dreams too. The Wildlies seen earlier in the cutscene were being used to power the machine necessary for completing said plan. It's revealed that Elfilin is, of course, the other half of F-86. That would explain why he was captured in the first place. After blasting Leongar in the face a few times, F-86, known actually as Facto Forgo, awakens to take control of his mind and exclaims that he will consume everything. Jesus Christ. In something straight out of something related to Akira, it escapes from its containment and turns himself into a massive sludge that absorbs everything in its path. Nightmare fuel has been found, ladies and gentlemen. After a mad dash out of the lab, Elfilin is unfortunately kidnapped, and Kirby makes his way to the roof of the lab to take on Facto Forgo's true form, Facto Elfilis. This leads to a really thrilling, intense boss fight against the super being, ending with Elfis in a desperate attempt to finish Kirby off, opening up a huge portal to send Planet Popstar hurtling towards the Forgotten Land. But with oddly convenient timing, Kirby uses his Mouthful ability to absorb a truck which fell right by him and... That was awesome. Kirby and Elfilin find themselves on Planet Popstar, but the threat of the space portal still remains. In an attempt to save Kirby, however, Elfilin sacrifices himself to save Kirby by closing the portals, and the day is saved. But we do have ourselves some post-game to cover as well. As soon as the credits finish rolling, we see Leongar trapped inside of the lab where he was left, in what looks like a comatose state. This is where you unlock the isolated isles, Forgo Dreams. This area basically serves as this game's EX mode, akin to previous games, featuring a slightly altered versions of the levels with harder bosses. Sprinkled throughout the level, you'll find pieces of Leongar's soul, and collecting enough of them allows you to settle the score once and for all, with a face-off against Forgo Leon and a battle with Soul Forgo, proving that the threat of Forgo is still very real. But, out of the blue, this little butterfly comes flying in, and if anyone remembers what that meant from Star Allies, that's right. The final boss of this mode ends with a climactic battle against Morpho Knight, which was just so epic. I loved that so much. After a tough battle, Morpho Knight is defeated, and Leongar finally goes back to his old self. Other than that, there is a true Coliseum mode where you can fight the harder versions of the bosses, as well as the stronger version of Facto Elfilis, known as Chaos Elfilis, but that's about it.
Kirby and the Forgotten Land proves that a jump to 3D doesn't require changing the gameplay style that much to accommodate a shift in perspective.
Despite the approach of playing it safe, Forgotten Land does so much right with its gameplay, its stage design, its mechanics, and its attention to detail. There is so much to do with all this content sprinkled throughout. It's just as fast-paced as Kirby games usually are, and controlling Kirby here feels just as natural as he does in 2D. Luckily, with an interview with the development team, it was announced that there is definitely more 3D Kirby to look forward to in the future, and even some 2D games too. It is impressive that for a series that has stayed 2D for so long, it was able to pump out a 3D title that was spectacular. Yeah, the story isn't much to look forward to, and the challenges can be sometimes annoying, but it does very little to take away from the fantastic experience Forgotten Land is.
As I said earlier, I don't think Forgotten Land is peak Kirby, but I think for somebody to make the statement to say that Kirby and the Forgotten Land is Kirby's best outing, I don't think that's an invalid statement. I think it's totally fair to think that. Good job, HAL Labs, you really outdid yourself here. Well, that certainly was a pleasant romp. Kirby games are always such feel-good titles, you know. With college starting in about a little over a month, I plan to at the very least get one video out, but preferably I want to try and get 2 more videos out before I head back. And I still have a pretty good list of both game reviews and video game related topics that I have on my list that I plan to do in the future. But for next time, we're going to take a look at a classic game to shake things up. As to what it is, well, you'll just have to wait and see. which I say a lot. More importantly, it'll serve as a nice chance to try recording with my new video capture card, which I'm really looking forward to using. But with that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.